Well, welcome to another lesson of the Content Modeling Weekly course. I am Marcelo Lewin, the Headless Creator. As always, there's my email address. Get a hold of me, marcelo@headlesscreator.com. Now, this is a four-part series. This is part number 3, where I take you back and we talk about the principles of content modeling that I live by every day and that I recommend you live by every day when you're content modeling. Now, in today's lesson, we're going to be talking about 3 specific principles. Not wasting content types, very important, using components for structures, and making our content model developer friendly. If you're wondering about what about author friendly, we're talking about that in the next lesson. So having said that, let's go ahead and jump in. Let me bring up here Miro, our trusty tool. And let's start with don't waste content types. And why is that important? Okay, so first of all, one thing I want to clarify is these 3 principles, and you'll see it in the board here, they work together. You have to strike a balance between all 3 of them because one can affect the other. And it's a mixture of art and science. And that's where a content architect, a content modeling specialist, is going to be able to strike that balance and hopefully make everybody happy. So having said that, let's start with the don't waste content types. And the reason you don't want to waste content types is it really depends on the headless CMS that you're going to be using. But there are some headless CMSs that will put a limit on the number of content types you could create. Once you reach that limit, you can't add any more content types unless you jump to the next level, which could be expensive, right? So as a content modeler, you've got to keep an eye on how many content types do you have available? What are the limits? Can you jump to the next level? And that's going to be approval based on your stakeholders and the company you're working in. And then you've got to balance the creating a really good content model that is scalable, but one also that doesn't come to that limit, right? Because then you're stuck. You can't do anything else. So let's start with an example here. Here's let's talk about 2 content types that I'm just creating: a person content type and a company content type. And we're going to say that a person has a first name, last name. They have some contact information, social media, and address. Now, if I had unlimited content types, the best way to do this would be I'm going to create a person content type. That person content type will have, of course, the field first name and last name, but it'll have a reference field that's 0 or many because a person may have a contact, may not have a contact. And in there would have a content type that focuses just on contacts. So that you can create an entry of a mobile phone, business phone, home phone, personal email, business email, and then give it a value, the phone number, right? Or the email address. So that would be my contact. Then I would have another contact or content type called social media that I can create unlimited entries as well of Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, whatever social media you want to add. And then finally, I would have an address because a person can have both a business and a home address. So they can create multiple addresses, right? So again, 0 to many reference here. So this would give me, if I have multiple content types, this would give me the most scalable solution because I can create a person. Now, a person may have or may not have contacts, so I don't need to have all the fields in this content type for contact information when they may not have it. Same thing with social media and address. For the address, again, if I have unlimited content types, I would have a state. I would have a content type for state, so I can add states, give it the proper name, code, and I would have an admin manage that. And I would do the same thing with country. I would add country content type, right? And then I could just link to that, right? So it's much easier than filling it out. Now, this is the proper way of doing this content model. And then if I want to add a company content type and then have contact, social media, and address, I could then just reuse these content types. Okay, now that is with an unlimited content types, or you have plenty of content types in your headless CMS. So now let's pretend you don't, right? That may happen. I know I've worked with customers where they pretty much were at the limit, so we had to figure it out. So in this case, unfortunately, you would want to, let's say you only have 3 or 4 content types left. you're probably not going to be able to separate all these things. You're going to have to create, and I hate this, but you would have to do it, a content type. For example, let's say we say person, and person has first name, last name, and then they may have an address, city, state, zip, country. It may have an email, business, email, personal, and then phone, business, phone, personal. So you would have to do something like this. Now, I know this isn't the best way to do it because, for example, let's make sure we do this. For example, they may not have a business email. So now you have extra fields for absolutely no reason, right? But of course, you've taken what would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 content types and just created one. So the idea here about not wasting content types, it's not really that if you do this, you're wasting content types, because you want to have a scalable content model. But the idea here is that if you are limited to the number of content types and you just can't add any more on your headless CMS, you're going to have to strike that balance. You're going to have to go, okay, look, we can't separate it all, or maybe you'll have a contact but not the email or not the address fields, right? You're going to have to strike that balance between that. Maybe on the state, you're going to do, it's going to be a type short text, and then you're going to give it a value of all the states, let's say in United States, right? You give it the value, so it's still a pull-down menu, but it's not scalable in this sense where you have a content type here. So for don't waste content types, just talk to your Headless CMS admin, and let me take a quick sip here, and figure out, okay, how many content types do we have? If we run into that wall, can we go to the next level, or do I need to start combining things here and figuring out? There is no right or wrong answer. The reality is you have technical limitations sometimes, and you have to deal with those. So this is the best possible scenario, but this is a scenario you may have to do just because you have to do it. So keep that in mind as a content architect. Okay. Excuse me. So the next one is using components for structures. And this is kind of similar to what we did here. But there are, well, let's talk about, first of all, what is a content type and what is a component? A content type is a data structure that is used to create collections of specific content. So that holds domain information usually. A component is just a structure that could be used and reused in many different content types. Its data that holds that in that component is only meaningful inside the content type that uses that structure. Okay? So what do I mean by that? Also keep in mind, every headless CMS will call it differently. Some headless CMSs will have components, others won't. Some will call them global types, others will call them blocks, some of them call them components, others call it objects. But they're going to be different. You'll have content types, and then you'll have one of those, right? A block, a global type, a component, or an object. And some may not even have that, may not even offer that. And that's where you kind of have to do this. Everything is a content type, but then you got to strike that balance. Here's where one principle affects the other, right? You got to strike the balance of, okay, we're going to create components, but we're wasting content types. So do we do that? And like I said, there's no right or wrong answer in that. But here's an example, and we're going back to the person. Usually, if you have the ability to create components, I recommend create components. And usually you can find very easily in a content type what should be in a component. So for example, we have a person that has a name, and most likely they'll have, let's do this, first name and last name. And a company will have a name. But then a company and a person both have addresses with city, state, zip. This one is, I'm not sure why I put that one there. Well, we'll go ahead and delete that. Let's delete that for now. It'll have a city, state, zip, country. They may have an email and a phone, country, email, and a phone, right? So you're going like, as a architect, you're looking at this and going like, okay, address, city, state, zip, and country, it's being reused here as well. And let's say we have another object that requires that. Let's say we have an object called location, or a content type called location. And location has address, it may have a name, address, city, state, zip, and country. So now you're looking at all these content types and you're going like, well, as a content modeler, we can go ahead and add all of these fields, but it seems like a waste, first of all, number one, excuse me again. And number two, if we want to scale this later, for example, let's say marketing comes and say, hey, we need to start tracking not just, let's remove the phone for now. Let's keep this simple. And the email, we'll just keep it to address for now. But let's say they come and say, hey, we need to track the geolocation now for this. So now you have to go into company and type in geo. You have to go into person, create a new field called geo, and then the same thing here. So that would be what you would